Chapter 16. As the sunlight hit his face, he knew it would be a bad day. He was used to nightmares about his own past lives, but nightmares of his brothers' lives terrified him. He didn't even know if what he dreamt after the dream visit was real, if his brother causing more unnecessary wars and bloodshed actually happened. Regardless, it left him shaking and frail, helplessly watching someone who raised him commit such inhumane actions, unable to stop it. Techno was asleep on a chair to his right. He must have pushed his lounge chair from his bedroom into here after Tommy fell asleep. The corner of his lips twitched at the considerate act. Techno made sure Tommy didn't wake up alone after another potential nightmare. But the warmth inside of him quickly overheated, burning him just like that explosion did as the resemblance set in. The mother had done the same thing for her children in that apartment. She laid by their side until they fell asleep, to keep them safe when they were most vulnerable. Yet not even the love a mother felt for their young could protect them from his brother's terrorism. He wept silently, clutching Henry to his chest, but the stuffed animal couldn't fulfill the weight he needed. With bleary eyes, he looked down at Henry, and empty beads stared back. It wasn't the same. Estella was gone, and he had to accept that. Tommy sat up, the phantom pains from falling to his death in the void aching his back. He grabbed his notebook from underneath his pillow, Henry still resting under his chin. His hands shook as he opened it to a familiar page. For once, he didn't want to update his file on Dream's visits. But he could do this. He could write this. He was fine. Dream said that Wilbur is my brother. Or was he lying? He hasn't lied about rebirth before. He held his pen tighter, the plastic digging into his palm. It was fine. It was all fine. He showed me what Wilbur did in his past lives. But he doesn't remember it now. Or does... Wilbur doesn't remember. Iron bled into his mouth. He had bitten into his lips. Teardrops dampened the paper, and he broke. It wasn't fine. He couldn't do this. He couldn't handle this. It was one shitty thing after another, and he never caught a fucking break. What do you even write in that book? Tommy jumped at Techno's voice. The man was awake. Oh, you're crying. Tommy wiped his face with his covers and put the notebook back under the pillow. Nice observation there, big man. I mean, I'm just stating the obvious, Techno said. A silence fell between them. Tommy opened his mouth to speak, to maybe even thank Techno for calming him down when he woke up, for not leaving him alone, and sending Wilbur away despite not knowing why the sight of the man invoked fear into him. But the words wouldn't leave his lips. Don't be cringe, Techno declared, sitting up in his chair. What? I don't need to hear your heartfelt or thankful words, he explained, especially this early in the morning. Tommy scowled at him, his eyes still red. How do you know I was gonna say anything nice? Your body tenses every time, as if it's against your natural coding to say nice things to people. Stop psychoanalyzing me, you prick. Tommy snapped as he pushed his covers around him to hide his body. Now look, your shoulders are relaxed. This is harassment. No, this is the result of that one psychology class I took before I dropped out of college. Get out of my room so I can get ready for school, Tommy said. Techno laughed and dragged the chair out of the room, shutting the door behind him. Tommy exhaled sharply, it digging in his chest as the loneliness settled in. To delay the family breakfast, he slowly got ready for school. The stairs creaked as he ambled down them. Techno and Phil were sat at the table, whilst Wilbur was busy in the kitchen. "Morning," he said as he joined them at the table. He needed to act normally, initiate and partake in the usual conversations they had at meals, maybe even call someone a dickhead at least once, for no one to suspect anything. "Well, if you flip those pancakes anymore, it's going to split," Phil called out. Tommy cleared his throat and poured himself some water. "I'll have you know, my pancake batter is superior to yours." Wilbur walked from the kitchen with a plate of stacked pancakes in his hands. "And that's not my problem if they split. They're for Tommy." He stared down at the plate placed in front of him. The soft smile from Wilbur entrapped him in safety, but the weak part of him begged to jerk backwards, to get away from him. A war waged in his head, yet each side was a losing battle. On the one end, he wanted to bathe in the comfort Wilbur brought, let the man ruffle his hair, but it also meant being content with the fact that this was his brother. He desired to be comforted by a fucking murderer. Whilst on the other end, he wanted to jump away from any contact with the man. Sickness crept up his throat at the mere sight of him. But that wasn't fair on Wilbur. He didn't remember his rebirth, his past lives. This man was innocent, oblivious to the blood on his hands. Either way, Tommy was fucked. Whether that meant he drowned in his selfishness and self-hatred, or in terror and guilt. A double-edged sword that punctured his heart no matter the angle he chose. "If I start crying, do I get one?" Techno snapped Tommy out of his daze. "No, you get nothing." Wilbur sat down to Tommy's right. Goosebumps pricked at his skin. "Thank you." Tommy mumbled under his breath, still staring down at the food Wilbur had made specifically for him. The same man who didn't care about the families or innocent people in those apartment buildings woke up earlier and prepared a whole meal just for his foster brother. Not even his own blood. For a foster kid. He knew they weren't the same person, physically and mentally. That only his brother's clean-slated soul resided in Wilbur. But it didn't make him feel any better. "You doing okay, Tommy?" Phil asked. His blue eyes glinted with concern. "You're quieter than usual." "I'm fine," he said as he stuck a fork into a pancake that he didn't have the stomach to eat. "Nervous for parents' evening?" Fuck, he forgot that was today. "Nope. All teachers love me." "I've read your history coursework, Tommy," Techno interjected, brushing off the glare Tommy directed his way. "They don't. All valid teachers love me." "What makes a teacher not valid?" Wilbur asked as he reached over to pick up a piece of toast. Tommy suppressed a flinch. He gulped and tried not to face Wilbur as he spoke. "There's a criteria. One of the things on the criteria is that they teach history." Techno further explained. "See, he gets it." "Your parents' evening is going to be painful, isn't it?" Phil sighed, exasperated. "It will be entertaining, at least," Tommy said. "But if you get embarrassed, just pull the I didn't raise him, he's a foster kid card." "I won't get embarrassed," Phil argued, though the confidence left his spirit as Tommy snorted at him. "Okay, as immoral as that is, I will consider it." Tommy grinned. "Get on ya." The conversation continued, and he tried to ignore his raging heartbeat. He didn't think one breakfast meal could bring him this much anxiety. "I'm going to school early. I need to talk to Tubbo about something. I'll walk." He didn't need to talk to Tubbo. In fact, the boy had been late to form for the past week, despite how he lived 5 minutes away from school. But he wanted this to end quickly. Wilbur frowned. I could drive us now. No, it's fine. Tommy interrupted, his voice too clipped to not be distrustful. All right, have fun at school, Phil said. I won't, he called out, trying to sound as cheerful as possible as he picked up his bag and exited the house. The weight on his shoulders didn't ease as he walked to school. Maybe it was because he didn't call someone a dickhead during breakfast. The day dragged on, but it felt worse at lunch. He was on his usual bench, with Ranboo and Tubbo talking to each other opposite him. They had already attempted many times to include Tommy in the conversation, but failed. He wanted to talk to someone about Wilbur, rather than their weird tangents. But even if he were to speak about Wilbur to them, they wouldn't understand. Ranboo would probably think he was sleep-deprived, which was true. And Tubbo would somehow link it to the German mafia, again. There was only one person who would believe him, Nikki. Already regretting his decision, he messaged her if she was in one of the music practice rooms like she normally was during lunch. When she confirmed that she was, Tommy stood up from the bench. I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be right back. He hastened his way to the music block and entered the room Nikki was in. She greeted him with a strum on the guitar. Hey, what do you need me for? She asked, smiling brightly at him. He paused and sat down on a chair, rummaging through his thoughts. He wasn't sure if Nikki knew about his brother, about the truth of what he did during his past lives and his ultimate fate. Did you know what Dream did to my brother? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tommy, I've already told you I don't know who Dream is, Nikki said, calmly. I've only heard of him because of your exile journal during history. Tommy flinched at the reminder that someday he would be learning about that part of his first life. So you don't know, he concluded. If Nikki didn't know who Dream was, then she didn't know what fate he gave his brother, with Leith and Tartarus. I don't know what. He bit on his cheek before asking, Did he ever tell you what he did during his past lives? No, he always brushed it off when I brought it up. She answered, more confused than before. Well, he told me about his failed guess of Medusa before he disappeared for the last time. He probably guessed correctly after that because he didn't come back to the void. His brother had lied to her. She didn't know that Wilbur was him, that he was drowned in the River Leith and tortured in Tartarus until it bored Dream. Would it be the right thing to tell her? To break her spirit and ruin her hope for his brother's freedom from the curse? He doubted that Nikki would tell him the truth if she knew. She would keep it to herself and let Tommy believe his big brother became a better person after his death, for peace of mind. Why are you asking me all this? Nikki asked. Did Dream show you your brother or something? The hopeful look in Nikki's eyes broke his heart. He smiled tightly as his eyes stung. Yeah, he showed me him. He sniffed. He was taken into the Elysian fields after he guessed correctly. Elysium? Holy shit. See, I told you he changed after his death. Even if he was a bit unstable, he was trying to be better. His mouth thinned, guilt riddling in his stomach as he let the girl believe his brother was in the paradise where heroes lived after death. He never really understood how ignorance was bliss, until she reached over and hugged him, happiness practically propelling off her. That's good. That's great, she whispered. Oh, you're wearing the necklace. His throat strained as he gripped at the necklace he forgot was clasped around his neck. The rope strangled him The white stone hissed at his skin. He rushed to remove it. I was gonna give it back to you. He made it for you, not me. Nikki's face furrowed. If that's what you want, then okay. Relief flooded through him as she took it off him. The loudest voice in his head wanted to cry, pleaded to not bottle up everything and wait for it to inevitably explode on him. But he never did listen to himself. He had cried over his brother, over Wilbur, too many times today. He just needed to get over this, somehow. Tommy almost fell asleep in his last lesson of the day. Chemistry, of course. But the constant vibrating coming from his phone in his blazer pocket kept him awake. It was Clementine, spamming him with pictures of cute animals she saved on Twitter, which meant she was in maths class. It was a ritual thing she did during that lesson. His phone vibrated again after a 2-minute silence, and he moved Ranboo's pencil case in front of him, ignoring the confusion from the boy. Moth. Clementine. Also, you okay? You looked off during English earlier. Tommy. I'm fine, just tired. Clementine. Okay. Hope you feel better later. Get some rest after parents' evening today. Tommy. Will do. Thank you, Clem. Clementine. Video attached. He muffled his laughter with his hand. Clementine always sent him weird edits she'd downloaded from TikTok whenever their conversations ended, with this one being an edit of Peppa Pig to the song Jealousy, Jealousy by Olivia Rodrigo. After the third video similar to this, Tommy decided not to question it whenever she sent them. Though his bad mood returned as he read another text message. Year 13 resit. Wilbur. Are you walking home again? Tommy. Yeah. Wilbur. Okay. Are you feeling better, by the way? Because of last night? Tom's? Tommy. Message deleted. I fucking hate you, and I shouldn't. Sorry. He squeezed his phone so hard in his hand that he thought the screen might crack. Disregarding the text messages, he picked up his pen and copied down whatever chemistry bullshit was written on the whiteboard at the front. Ranboo tapped on his shoulder. You good, man? Tommy clenched his jaw. He was fucking sick of people asking him that all day. He was fine. He was perfectly fine. Yeah, why? He answered, trying to seem unbothered, but the gritting of his teeth really didn't support that appearance. You've written down that question 4 times already, Ranboo said, pointing at Tommy's paper, which, to put it frankly, was a mess. You sure you're good? He sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. This day just got worse and worse. I didn't get much sleep last night, he said at last. Being honest was the only thing keeping him from taking his anger out on Ranboo. Something he didn't ever want to do. Ranboo retrieved his coat from the back of his chair and laid it on top of Tommy's chemistry work. Get some sleep, dude. Miss can't see you from where she sits. At the mention of sleep, Tommy's head drooped forward and his eyes briefly fluttered. I might have another nightmare, he whispered. I'll be here, Ranboo said, and puffed up his coat so the makeshift pillow was more comfortable. Trust me, it's fine to sleep. He hesitated before laying his head down, still facing Ranboo. The other boy grabbed his hand and held it reassuringly as Tommy drifted off to sleep. Later on, Tommy sat in the front of the car as Phil drove to the school for the parents' evening appointment. A little voice in his head begged for him to grab the steering wheel and just crash the car. It was a morbid thought, but a necessary one. Maybe a little bit more fucked than usual, especially since Phil was in the car as well. And that man wasn't capable of doing anything wrong in his life. There were no counter-arguments to this objective fact. Though Phil had been sighing for the past 2 minutes, which was worrying. As they drove through the school gates and parked, Phil turned off the car, but didn't move to get out. He stopped and faced Tommy. "You want to say anything before I get shitted on by your teachers?" "Do not believe a word that comes out of Miss Allingham's mouth," Tommy said. "And anyone else's for that matter." Phil sighed once more before exiting the car. "Is there a teacher that actually likes you?" Phil asked as they walked into the school entrance. He struggled to name one. "My head of year, I guess. But there was that time she found out I pulled the fire alarm." "You pulled what?" he exclaimed, loudly, attracting the attention of other parents. "Oh yeah, they were going to call you, so I asked Techno to steal your phone and fake a British accent," Tommy explained, before pausing. "Wait, I shouldn't have said that." "How did you even convince Techno to do that for you?" Phil asked in disbelief. "I did his chores for a month." "You little shit," he muttered. As much as Tommy dreaded his teachers telling Phil how much of a problem he was in class, they used many synonyms to professionally call him an annoying twat that should shut the fuck up. It wasn't that bad. Even though Miss King hated him and threatened to change the seating plan so Clementine wasn't next to him if he didn't behave better, he got good grades, so Phil wasn't as fussed. Phil had tried to be civil with all the teachers until Miss Allingham's appointment. It went downhill from there. Tommy shifted in his chair as Miss Allingham began to complain about him. "It seems your son treats my lessons like art classes." "Are they at least good drawings?" Phil asked. Tommy failed to conceal his laughter, and ignored the softness in his chest, as Phil didn't correct her that Tommy technically wasn't his son. "Look, all I want to know is if he'll pass the class." "He'll pass if he sticks to the essay structures I give him and stops putting in his opinion." "Why can't I put in my opinion when I'm answering a question that requires it?" Tommy challenged. "Because your opinion contradicts the entire teachings of our history." He glared at her proclaimed ownership of his history. She did jack shit during the wars whilst he bled for them. "Your arguments need to be based on fact and supported by evidence, which you don't use." Tommy grinned widely at her. "I'll have you know I'm pretty based." Phil groaned from beside him. Miss Allingham gaped at Phil, almost expecting him to whack Tommy across the head for misbehaving. "I can see why Tommy isn't disciplined in my classes then." She spat with spite. Tommy leaned forward to roast the fuck out of this woman, whether with his words or actions. But Phil placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, Tommy, don't say anything. She's right," Phil said, his voice suddenly filled with sorrow. "You know, as a single working father, I try my best to discipline the children I foster from struggling homes, but at least have some respect. Especially after Tommy's biological parents recently passed away from a tragic plane crash." Tommy gawked at him. Holy fuck. Miss Allingham looked as if she was about to cry. He didn't even remember his biological parents, but they probably would go abroad on a holiday without him, since they left him on the doorstep of a fucking orphanage. "Oh," she mumbled. "I wasn't aware of his situation. My condolences." Tommy covered his mouth with his hand, trying not to laugh. Phil nodded, sadness and appreciation in his eyes. "Is there anything else we need to discuss? My other 2 sons at home are looking after the baby for me." "What fucking baby?" No, that's all," his teacher said. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Kraft." Tommy walked out of that parents' evening with more trauma than he came in with, according to Phil, that is. The moment both the car doors shut, laughter and cackling filled the car. "Did you see the look on her face?" Phil cut himself off with a wheeze. "Holy shit. Phil's in Minecraft. That was the best thing to ever happen," Tommy said, his lungs hurting. "I think that parents' evening went quite well. Well, not for my biological parents, at least." That sent Phil onto another wheeze until he couldn't breathe. Tommy allowed himself this. He deserved to laugh his heart out and end this horrible day with finding humor in lying to your least favorite teacher and putting unnecessary guilt onto their shoulders. He needed this.